to an altar call at a Billy Graham crusade. Brandon stayed in his seat. He'd already committed himself to life of drinking and drugs, and nothing was going to get in the way of his pleasure. Not even his mother's diagnosis of stage 4 cancer.
I was always just living for the pleasure of the moment. That's what really defined my life, is how can I get the next high? How can I get the next enjoyment? How can I maximize this fun?
Brandon Sutton grew up in a stable, loving home, but in junior high, he tried marijuana for the first time and got hooked.
I love the effects it had. I love the process. I loved, the ritual, everything about it. I love smoking it.
Smoking pot opened the door to harder drugs and drinking in high school. As his life slid into spiritual darkness, his family found spiritual light at a Billy Graham crusade.
My entire family went forward at his call, and I stayed in my seat. I thought it was embarrassing. I wasn't committed to what they were committing themselves to. I wouldn't have called myself an atheist or an unbeliever. I would have said I believe those things, but it wasn't a part of my life.
Brandon's drug use became a way to cope when he received shocking news from his mom.
She starts crying and telling me she has stage 4 brain cancer, lung cancer, and lymph node cancer, and that the doctors gave her 3 to 6 months to live. I'm devastated. And, I just remember crying uncontrollably and telling her everything's going to be okay, we're going to be fine. And, knowing inside, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. I saw her then take chemotherapy and radiation, and she started to wither away. And I just couldn't handle that. I come home from school, I didn't want to look at her, I didn't want to be around her. And so I would escape to go, use drugs, to drink, just anything to escape reality.
For the next 5 years, Brandon's life was out of control. Cocaine became his next obsession, leading to criminal activity and jail time, even stealing from his dying mother.
At this point, it just wasn't fun anymore. That's why I call it phase 3, is because, phase 1, fun and games. Phase 2, still fun and games, but numb and pain because of mom. Phase 3 is just, I don't want to be sober and I don't want to be drunk. Life is miserable. I'm not happy. Suicide crossed my mind as an option. Going back to jail, where I just came from, was an option. Trying to find a recovery home or some type of rehab, something. I got to do something because this is not working.
Seeing his desperation, Brandon's grandmother invited him to live with her in a different state.
I knew that if I started drinking and drugging again, I'd become a terror to my grandmother. And so I stayed sober for the first 30, 40 days while I was down here, but I wasn't happy about it.
He attended AA meetings and longed for the power to be set free from addiction. Then his aunt invited him to church, and he heard a message that changed his life.
It was completely different than anything I've ever, experienced. But he's also saying and talking about things that I've never heard before either, like God desires a relationship with you. He desires for you to know him and for him to know you, for you to experience him, for you to seek him, that you can expect God to work in your life. That's what I was seeking. I was seeking a relationship with God. I was seeking to know God.
That night, Brandon surrendered and prayed for God to save him.
I said, Lord, I can't do this anymore. Please do for me what I can't do for myself. Went to bed that night and woke up in the middle of the night. And it's just, I remember it like it was yesterday. All of a sudden it dawned on me that I didn't desire to use, to drink, that I didn't have those thoughts anymore. And just this rush of power and presence of God entered into my life like I'd never experienced before. I felt so hopeful and optimistic, like good things are going to happen and continue to happen for me. Life has meaning and purpose, and God, desires to do something with my life.
Soon after his encounter with God, Brandon returned home and told his dying mom of his newfound faith. She passed away days later, and at her funeral, he was able to point to God as a source of hope, even in the hardest moments.
I have this new life now, and I just had this desire for all my old friends to sit and just let me share my testimony in the gospel, what Christ has done. And now I'm standing up before them as a completely new person, sharing the gospel, sharing the testimony of my mom's faith in Christ and what God has done. And it was just an amazing moment. I sensed a deep calling to preach the day we buried my mother.
Brandon now has a family of his own and leads a weekly recovery program where he shares the same message of hope that rescued him from addiction.
I've been sober now for almost 16 years, following the Lord. Every year's gotten better. That's the way it was. It was like every month was better than the last one. Every year was better than the last one, and things just kept building and getting better. I have today, through Christ, complete power over drugs and alcohol. What once had authority over me, I have authority over today.